the application of Israeli law in Jerusalem in 1967 has once again become a topical subject in the context of the proposals to do the same in parts of Area C, which has been much discussed. Fleur, could you take us from the beginning, tell us what happened in terms of the administration of Jerusalem in 1967 and how this has impacted the city that you are involved in governing today?
Thank you so much, Natasha, and thank you everybody else, the Turners from UKLFI. You have been admiring your work from afar. We need good, intelligent advocates like you, and we're lucky to have you. So thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this event. So in 1967, after the Six-Day War, the government of the day, quite rightly, immediately unified the city. And that means, there's a few things that means. In terms of the rights of the people that, I don't like to use the word annex, application of sovereignty, of Israeli sovereignty, reunification of our eternal capital. And that meant a few things. First of all, in terms of the rights of the Arab community that were brought in under Israeli sovereignty, it meant that now they were under Israeli law and not Jordanian law. You have to understand, before 67, it was Jordan. There was no, as we know, there was no independent Palestinian entity. The West Bank and the part of East Jerusalem was Jordanian, and we took it from which was also illegal of the Jordanians, and we took it back from the Jordanians. And that meant a few things. Now, these people who are application of our law are now under Israeli sovereignty, which means they have the right to apply for citizenship. It means they have the right to municipal city service like everybody else. The people who don't apply for citizenships and remain residents and not citizens still have all the social security benefits of the State of Israel, the healthcare, and the education. The education is more complex because, unfortunately, until today, the majority, 93% of the Arab school children are still under Palestinian Authority controlled schools. But that's another story, and we'll discuss it when we're discussing the educational part. But there are Israeli schools for Arab residents, where the first language, of course, is Arabic and the second language is in Hebrew. And that is also something that, as residents of the city, they get. So that's about the rights of these residents. Now, if you're a resident, you have the right, sorry, that's my dog. If you're a resident, you have a right to vote in the local elections, but you're not allowed to vote in the national elections. But everybody in East Jerusalem has the right to apply for citizenship. So whoever's not a citizen is because they've decided not to be a citizen, not because they don't have that right. And so on the surface, what it looks like is that there's complete equality of rights and a complete equality of services. Now that was the theory, and that's what was applied. But I'm going to be very honest. For many, many, many years, the different Israeli governments, right and left, and it didn't make a difference. They didn't really know what they were going to do with East Jerusalem. Why do I say that? Because you can't pretend on the one hand to say this is a united city, and on the other hand, treat the two parts of the city differently in terms of resources. Now, rights, we have the same rights. Now we have to talk about opportunity, because rights without having the debate on opportunity is not the full picture. And I am a member of the Likud, right-wing party, and I can tell you, for many, many years, Israel didn't know what they wanted to do with East Jerusalem, because they thought to themselves, some governments thought to themselves, oh, it's going to be part of a future Palestinian state, and it's going to be divided, and so why should we be investing in East Jerusalem when in a minute it's going to go and become the capital of Palestine? And so for many years, what we found is that we have a very underdeveloped part of the city, and we have a much more developed part of the city. That's the difference between East and West. Now, 3 years ago, Minister Zev Elkin from the Likud party, he was the Jerusalem Affairs Minister at the time, said, we can't continue like this. We can't, on the one hand, say it's a united city, on the other hand, not spread equal resources. It is one city, it's going to remain one city, and therefore we have to build it up. And he brought unprecedented budgets to deal with infrastructure, employment, and education. And now we're beginning to see an influx of investment, and I'm very happy to be a part of that. And in order for the residents of East Jerusalem to feel and see that they're part of one united city, it's not just something which is a reality on paper. Now you have to understand that the residents of East Jerusalem comprise 37% of the residents of the entire city. We're talking about almost 40% of the residents of Jerusalem. And so we need to make sure that we embrace this part of the city in and not isolate them, because that's how we can actually create the environment that the reunification of the city was meant to have done. And so this is the reality. Today we have put a lot of infrastructure into, a lot of resources into infrastructure such as sewage, which was behind the times, such as pavements, roads, building schools. We've been doing all that over the last few years. I'm also very involved in getting a high-tech park built in East Jerusalem. We have more students than ever from East Jerusalem in higher education in Israel. Again, we're providing all the things that are not provided in their education system, like Hebrew, which is pretty important if you want to get on, do something in Israel and in Jerusalem. And so we're bringing in now training courses, small loans for businesses, encouraging women to take a more active role in society, working with local leadership. And I have to say that during the corona, we found that there was incredible collaboration, cooperation between the Arabs and the Jews in Jerusalem. Everybody understood they were fighting one common enemy. And I think slowly now we're beginning to see that our residents from the Arab part of the city feel like residents and have no interest in the city being divided again, because they understand that they're going to have more freedom and opportunity under Israeli sovereignty than they will ever have under the, corrupt Palestinian dictatorship.
And it doesn't sound from your description like Israel would have been in a position to take any of these measures if it hadn't extended its law administration and jurisdiction in the first instance.
We had to do it, and we had to do it immediately in 1967. Somebody asked why there wasn't a mayor, there was a mayoral election, why the Arab guy who stood wasn't allowed to run. It was discovered that he actually wasn't a resident of Jerusalem. So that's kind of a requirement. But my friend Ramadan Davash, another member of the Arab community, did stand for city council. But unfortunately, we have a problem in the Arab community, and that is very, very low voter turnout, mainly because of pressure from the Palestinian Authority. The Arabs in East Jerusalem are between a rock and a hard place. They get pressured by the Palestinian Authority not to work with us, not to normalize ties with us. And on the other hand, they know they've got an outstretched hand for the city. So it's complicated, it's getting better. And I'm hoping to have some Arab residents as members of city council very, very soon.
So I'm wondering if this complexity plays into two questions that we've had going to the same issue, both through the chat and the Q&A, that in 1967, when Arabs were offered in East Jerusalem full citizenship, what proportion accepted, and what is the proportion of residents that have Israeli citizenship in East Jerusalem today?
So only 10% have Israeli citizenship, but we've, in the last few years, had an influx of interest and applications, so much so that the Ministry of Interior had to open an extra branch in East Jerusalem. And last year, in 2019, we had a record year of applications and granting of citizenship to Arabs from East Jerusalem.
I'm going to hit you with one more technical question which has arisen. Do the Arabs of East Jerusalem have to pay municipal taxes? And if so, what is the percentage of them that pay this? How many hold Jordanian or Palestinian Authority citizenship? And how much of the municipal budget is allocated to East Jerusalem?
So, so the question was whether they, okay, so they do pay city taxes. And they pay quite well. You know, that's a myth that the Arabs don't pay city taxes. They do for mainly one reason. If you don't pay city taxes, then you can't get Social Security. And so most of them pay. And we're trying to improve the services that they should be getting because of the money that they pay. What was the second question?
The question related to how many of them also hold Jordanian or Palestinian Authority citizenship?
Well, the majority that have passports are Jordanian passports. You know, the Palestinian Authority has travel documents. They don't have a passport because they're not a country. Most of them, I'd say, would hold Jordanian or Palestinian Authority papers and about 10% Israeli passports. And that number will go up. You know, when the peace plan, when the Trump peace plan deal of the century was announced, I think the people who breathed the biggest sigh of relief were the Arabs from Jerusalem that realized that they were going to be on this side of the fence.
So coming to that debate and the issue, we've had a request for clarification as to what laws currently apply in Judea and Samaria, in particular those cities and towns in Area C which are likely to be the subject of these proposals to apply Israeli law, like Ma'ale Adumim, Ariel, Modi'in Elite. The questioner asks, is it Israeli law, Jordanian law, military law, or a mixture?
It's worse. It's a mixture. You know, it's a very complicated system, which is a mix of British mandate law, Ottoman law, Jordanian crumbs that are left, and all under civil administration. And that's why this is a mess that we need to sort out. We need to sort out this mess because it's not fair that citizens of the State of Israel have to be living in this hybrid, archaic world where they have to, in order to apply for, I don't know, changing their windows, they need to go through these, you know, archaic mix-mash civil administration army involved. It's not a proper way of running a town or a city, and there's absolutely no reason to keep it this way because Area C is an area that we never transferred autonomy or self-government to the Palestinian Authority the way that we did with areas A and B. We never passed that. Why? Because these are the main centers where Jewish settlements are, where Jews live. And so Area C was always the area of the West Bank and the Jordan Valley that was going to stay in Israeli hands. And so what we're doing is we're basically ensuring that we don't wait. We can't be at the mercy of Palestinian rejectionism in order to define our own destiny. We've done that for 72 years. We've tried 3, 4 peace agreements that didn't come to fruition. We offered them in San Remo, basically the whole of Jordan. We offered them again in 1938. We offered it again after in 48, after the War of Independence, before 67, after 67, Oslo, etc., etc. Nobody can say, certainly nobody who understands history or has any notion of neutrality can say that Israel hasn't tried. And so at this point, when we have the opportunity of a White House that understands that we can't be the victims of wars starting against us and Palestinian rejectionism of very fair agreements, we have to move forward. We have to define our borders. Why should we be a sovereign country without sovereign borders? It makes no sense. And so when you have this current White House in office and we have that opportunity, we should take that opportunity. Now, in the Jordan Valley, there are about 25,000 residents, Palestinian residents, who I'm in favor of offering them citizenship in the same model as Jerusalem. Why not? 25,000 is not a number that's going to affect the Jewish majority in any significant way. It's the fair thing to do if you are applying sovereignty to that region, and there's towns and villages that get caught in that. And another thing, they'll be extremely happy. They won't say it out loud, but of course they will. The West Bank, the Gush Etzion bloc is a different story. There is much more mixture there of Palestinians and Jews and different settlements. The numbers are very difficult for us to cope. But there's much more contiguous territory for us to be able to apply sovereignty. The Gush Etzion is a bloc. We can apply sovereignty to that bloc and have regular Israelis living regular lives under regular laws. And that's really what we need to be doing. The model of Jerusalem has worked, I say, and I think that the things that we haven't done properly in Jerusalem, now we can learn from when we start with the application of sovereignty. We have a really interesting case study here of how, what to do and sometimes what not to do. But I think that we should be using Jerusalem as a model and announcing
and of course,
sovereignty as
looking to Jerusalem as a model underlines this move as an application of Israeli law, as opposed to any change to the status of the territory, to borders or sovereignty. There are a few questions that have arisen with respect to the specifics that this model provides for. We've had one asking, how long does it take for an Arab application for citizenship to be processed? And are there a proportion that are refused or not handled expeditiously? Do you have experience of the process itself?
I do. Look, the process is slow and cumbersome. And I don't know, I'm going to be totally honest, I don't know what part of that is politics or it's just inefficient Israeli bureaucracy. I know that I have some Arab residents who I see Arab residents as my constituents too. And many of them have come to me for help. And I have helped everybody that has come to me to push forward their application, making a phone call, trying to use my contacts. But I have to tell you, and I believe the people who are the bureaucrats, the civil servants that are dealing with this, they are not political people and they don't have any agenda. And they just tell me, Fleur, it takes time to get citizenship. I mean, look at the US, for example, as a model. It takes time. Now, of course, I think that if you are somebody who's born in Jerusalem, it shouldn't take you that long. But there is a very cumbersome system. We've tried to alleviate that cumbersome system by opening, like I said earlier, opening a branch of the Israeli Ministry of Interior in East Jerusalem, near the Kalandia crossing, which crosses towards the West Bank. And so we have now a full-time office only dealing with this in East Jerusalem. And so I'm hoping that things will become faster. I don't know how long it takes. I know a friend of mine, it took him 2 years just to get the first appointment. And now he's on the path for citizenship. I think the cumbersome thing is getting the first appointment, which takes like a year or two. And then after that, you're basically on a path for citizenship. Most people who apply get it. Of course, there's always nefarious applications, people who are not from Jerusalem at all, but whose husbands, cousins, fathers, sisters, friend is, and they put a wrong address or they put a fraudulent address. Of course, you're going to get things like that. But in general, the people who are bona fide Jerusalem residents get citizenship, even if it takes long.
And on this, we've also been asked about apparently a relatively recent Supreme Court decision on the need to process more effectively these applications. If you're aware of that also, I believe it's garnered quite a bit of press coverage, but it would suggest that actually...
When was that?
I don't know. I wasn't aware of it, but one of
Oh,
our
no, if it's last year, it was probably because of that decision that they opened the branch in East Jerusalem.
Right. So measures are being taken to address
Yes.
those issues. There's a question as to whether there is a risk that an unforeseen number of people not otherwise assumed to be eligible for citizenship would suddenly move to East Jerusalem and then claim citizenship. So the question asks, do you or can you or should you control the number of new residents of Jerusalem?
Well, this is actually, you've hit the nail on the head of one of our main problems, and I'll tell you what it is. One of our main problems is that when the security fence was built, which I moved to Israel from the UK in 2001, in the middle of the second intifada. Everybody thought we were nuts. My family didn't talk to us for 3 months because they thought we were crazy coming to Jerusalem at the middle of the second intifada. Now, the way that the intifada was eventually quelled was by building a wall, a separation fence, to keep the West Bank terrorists from coming into Jerusalem, to hermetically, you can't really hermetically seal Jerusalem, but at least to have some type of buffer from the terrorists just walking in. What happened? That buffer was built in bordering Shuafat refugee camp and put a number of villages on the other side of the fence, whilst remaining in municipal Jerusalem. In other words, on the other side of the fence, you have 3 and 4 Arab villages that are still municipal Jerusalem, supposed to get our services, but you have to cross a checkpoint to go there. Very impractical. Now, one of the things in the Trump peace plan that I'm very much in favor of is keeping the separation fence as the border to Jerusalem and taking the 3 and 4 villages out of the municipal Jerusalem boundary and giving them their own municipal council and their own budgets. Now, why do we want to do this? And of course, the extreme right wing say, oh, you want to divide the city. It's total rubbish because, of course, it's nowhere near the historical, biblical city of Jerusalem. It's way out in the suburbs. And the guy that I ran with for City Hall, Minister Zev Elkin, not considered a centrist, considered a pretty rightist, he actually tried to pass a law through the Knesset to pull out these villages from the municipal authority of Jerusalem. But the main reason he wanted to do that is because in paper, there's about 30, 40,000 residents. In reality, there's about 110,000 residents. And that's exactly what you were saying, Natasha. These residents are coming in from the West Bank, either moving in with cousins, family members, marrying. Of course, they're completely free to marry who they want, building illegally, and basically taking the fact that these villages are on the other side of the security fence as carte blanche, moving in without being official residents of the city. And then once they have an address, apply for citizenship. It's the rush. People are smelling blood in the water in terms of a boundary because of the Trump peace plan. And they want to make sure that they're on the state of Israel side, which tells you everything you need to know. But the net result of that is that we could be at risk in Jerusalem of losing our Jewish majority, which is, of course, the whole raison d'etre of the Jewish state of Israel, that it should remain Jewish, it should remain the home state and the home capital for Jews. And so we have a situation where I'm very pleased that the Trump deal of the century reflected my opinion that Mempe, the Shuafat refugee camp, along with Kfar Akab and other smaller villages, should be outside of the boundary between Israel and a future Palestinian state.
Because there were proposals a few years ago to incorporate
Yes.
them holistically into the municipal region.
Well, to take them out of the Jerusalem municipal umbrella. To make them their own municipal, to make them their own local council. That's what Minister Zev Elkin tried to do. Who stopped him? The right part of the Knesset, because they don't want to give up anything. But it's actually a liability for us to keep it, because our majority is compromised by all the people flooding in from the West Bank into these villages that are strictly speaking Jerusalem, but ultimately mainly associated with the Palestinian Authority. Hamas is rampant there. This is where UNRWA schools, you can find some UNRWA schools. We can't control that area. It's outside of our boundary, physical boundary, and therefore it's outside really of our legislative boundary in the way that we can control it. So I'm with Minister Zev Elkin. I think we should put them, and the deal of the century reflects this, and I think, and that's actually something I'm very happy to do.
So staying with the deal of the century for a moment, you had recently an article in the Jewish News responding to Prime Minister Boris Johnson's op-ed in Yediot Ahronot, where you deal with the misconceptions surrounding the proposals. It is called "What is the Real Barrier to Peace, Prime Minister?" I'd encourage the audience to look it up. But you answer your question at the end, the question of what is killing the chance of peace? And you say it is the brainwashing of children through an educational system partly funded by the UK, that teaches innocent children that the best they can hope for is to martyr themselves for their cause. And tragically, that cause is the annihilation of the state of Israel. Fleur, can you tell us first about your motivation for that article, and also about your experience of the education system in Jerusalem and the differences between East and West?
Yeah, I really, that article sat in my head for a few weeks when I read Boris Johnson's letter. And I encourage everybody to read the article, because I actually mentioned that Boris has always been a friend of Israel. He gets it. He understands Zionism. He is a Zionist himself. I've heard him say it. I met him when he was mayor of London. And so everything I'm saying to a friend, the way he's telling us as a friend. And what I was explaining in that article is what we spoke about a little earlier, why the application of sovereignty is not an impediment to peace and not an impediment to the two-state solution. But what I brought in, which I think is much more serious, and nobody is taking this seriously enough, and this is what hurts me, is the fact that the Palestinian Authority school system is a system based on incitement, the complete denial that we even exist. We're not there in the geography books. We don't exist. The towns and villages, Tel Aviv has got another name, and everything's got another name, as if we weren't here. So you've got incitement towards Jews and Israelis. You have a complete denial we exist, and you have the glorification of martyrdom, which is the last paragraph of my article that you quoted. In other words, there's two obsessions with the Palestinian Authority school system. The first is the fact that that they are obsessed with the right of return. The right of return essentially means that all the Palestinians that were somehow moved or had to leave or ran away at the urging of, I have to say, Arab governments at the time of these wars, they were the ones who said, run away, we're going to come back and throw them all out. That all of these people have to come back to the place that they left. That is a complete obsession. There are videos that they ask children, okay? They ask children, where do you live? These are children who've been born in a particular area of Jerusalem, and these are children whose parents have been born in that particular area of Jerusalem, and in some cases, even their grandparents. So they're three generations in the same neighborhood in East Jerusalem, and they say, where are you from? He says, no, we're only here temporarily. We're going back and conquering Jaffa. We're going back and taking Malcha back. Malcha is the area with the biggest mall in the city. Nobody's going back there. We have a technological park or we have a mall. And this is how they're brought up. So let me repeat. It's a glorification of martyrdom. In other words, saying to kids, the best you can hope for your life, the best thing you can do for your people is martyr yourself, okay? B, incitement. School books that say, if you killed 5 Jews in the first Intifada and you killed 10 in the second Intifada, how many Jews did you kill? If you had 2,500 martyrs in the first Intifada and 1,500 martyrs in this, if you are throwing this is the physics books, if you're throwing a catapult rock at an Israeli soldier at this speed, do you understand? So the whole system is based around inciting against Israel. We don't appear anywhere. We're not there. Total denial we exist. So when these kids grow up and they're like, oh my God, there's an Israel. And 3, like I said, the right of return. But the saddest thing is that under our own nose in Jerusalem, in my municipal authority that is in charge of 110,000 is Arab Jerusalem residents, children, only 7% are in our municipal schools, which teach the East Jerusalem residents, teaches them the Israeli curriculum for Arabs. Now, the Israeli curriculum for Arabs is not a Zionist curriculum. It's a curriculum of core subjects taught in Arabic with the second language of Hebrew, which means that whoever graduates from that can get a job in Israel, can go to further education in Israel. 93% of the children in East Jerusalem are going to schools that are indirectly run by the Palestinian Authority, use the Palestinian Authority textbook, including UNRWA schools. There are 4 UNRWA schools here that are funded by the UK government that teach the same curriculum that the Palestinian Authority teach. In other words, UNRWA has said, forget our principles, forget the UN, forget the 2-state solution, forget peace and reconciliation, forget it all. We're just going to take the curriculum and use it to teach the kids who come to the UNRWA schools. In other words, their own curriculum that they've adopted is in contravention of their own principles. And that is the situation. And so in my article, I was basically saying to Boris, I understand that you think that the application of sovereignty is a barrier to peace. But if you ask me, in my humble opinion, indoctrinating children into hatred and denial that the Jewish people are here in this country, denial of the state of Israel exists, and the obsession with the right of return that you are funding, Mr. Prime Minister, is way worse than us taking Israeli law and applying it to people who are already living as Israeli citizens.
I'd like to come on to UNRWA in just a little bit, but on the explanation you've just provided, our audience asks, why do the State of Israel and the municipality of Jerusalem permit the Palestinian Authority to control the schools in East Jerusalem to a certain extent? That's UNRWA controlled also. So could you describe the dynamic there?
I don't know how this happened. I don't. These schools were Jordanian. For historical reasons, I think they were not taken over by the Jerusalem Municipal Authority. I think combined with the hostility and the dual loyalty or the no loyalty that there was towards Israel at the time. Look, the Arab, you have to understand, the Arab community in East Jerusalem has changed over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, they wouldn't be saying, Fleur, I don't want this to be 2 cities, I want it to be 1 city. Today, they're saying it. They weren't saying it 10 years ago. There has been a change, okay? We surveyed the families in East Jerusalem, 50% of them want their children to study in our schools, but they're scared. They're scared about what's going to happen with the Palestinian Authority when there's a shift. The Palestinian Authority, of course, are doing propaganda day and night, calling people traitors who come and get educated in our school. So why this happened, I think if you ask me, it's a combination of fear from the Israeli part to take over a hostile system with hostile teachers, and the pushback that was going to get from the Palestinian Authority and the people themselves. Maybe there's an element here of funding, like why are we going to take on board this thing when they don't even want us to? And I think what I mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation, the fact that Israel, the subsequent different Israeli governments, did not really know what they wanted to do with Jerusalem. They weren't really sure. And I think that kind of hesitation has really worked to the detriment of the city and to the detriment of the Arab population in the city. If we would have been much more, resolute about this in 67, 68, 70s, and the 80s, we wouldn't be in the situation, and we would have a much more educated population and a much better quality human capital. We're working towards that now, but it's going to take a while.
Question posed on the UNRWA school system as to why Arabic is used in these schools as the main language of instruction, even though they're in Israel proper.
Well, exactly. This is my biggest gripe with the school system in Jerusalem, is not even the incitement anymore. It's the fact that they don't teach Hebrew. And what's happening is that what happens is that you have all these kids who graduate high school and they don't speak a word of the language of the city in which they live. It's ridiculous, which means it affects their higher education, and it affects their job prospects. And in the end, it ends up becoming a gender issue, and I'll explain why. When they're 18, the boys go out and they go to work. They learn Hebrew on the streets. So they go to work in supermarkets, low-level paid jobs, because they're not going to university, because they can't speak the language. So instead they get a job in a supermarket, or they get a job in construction, or they get a job in a hotel. And the men learn Hebrew by being out there. The women get married young, they have children, and they don't go out to work until they're in their late 20s, when their kids are already beginning to be a little older. And what happens is that then they don't learn Hebrew. And so we have a situation where the workforce participation of Arab women in Jerusalem is the lowest in the Middle East, not just the lowest in the country. Many Arab towns and villages in the country where women work. Because of the particular situation with the education and the language in East Jerusalem, this ends up becoming a gender issue where women are not participating in the job market. And so what we're doing now is a number of things. First of all, we're working very hard to try and put in mass amounts of language classes in schools that are subsidized. At the moment, you have a situation in which, poor families are going and getting out loans for £2,000 in order to learn Hebrew, because their school never taught them. And so the smart ones go out, they find the money, and they go and they learn Hebrew. We have models in universities here in the city where we do a 6-month preparatory course before going into higher education. And that 6 months, they learn Hebrew and they do all the different things that they need to do in order to get the matriculation to go into Israeli universities. I'm very involved, and I took friends from the UK and MPs from the UK to see an entrepreneurship and small loans program in East Jerusalem for women. And I'm very involved in trying to help them get more funding. We're hoping the DFID maybe one day will be part of that funding. This is amazing because we have women who are not going to learn the language, but instead we're empowering them to open their own small businesses within their own communities, to open up childcare facilities. And so we're trying to even the playing field after years and years and years of nobody dealing with it. And so it's going to take us a while to close these gaps, but we've started, and I'm very encouraged by the reaction of the Arab residents and the potential that we have there in human capital.
Of course, if we're looking at DFID funding in the future, this is going to have to come from this new merge the new model emerging from the merger of DFID and the Foreign Commonwealth Office. So we'll see what their priorities might be. I wish you luck with that venture. We've mentioned UNRWA quite a bit. Of course, in March, they got a new head, Philippe Lazzarini. What do you make of this appointment?
I was interviewed a couple of weeks ago in the Jerusalem Post about this because they interviewed him, and they interviewed him about incitement in school books. And Mr. Lazzarini said, no, 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 no. We have no incitement in our school books. I said, but you're using Palestinian Authority school books. So he says, no, we train the teachers of our schools that even if there's incitement in the school books, not to actually incite. What he doesn't mention is that every school book comes with a school manual, which is also created by the Palestinian Authority, and they're full of incitement. And so my actual quote in that article from Mr. Lazzarini's comments were, he's either digging his head in the sand or he's misleading the public, because of course there's incitement when that is in every line of every school book and every subject. And if the man is not admitting that he has a problem, then we have an even bigger problem. Because to know you're an alcoholic, you have to admit you're one first. He's not there. He hasn't admitted he has a problem first, and so we can't fix it.
Well, school books is rather a topical subject. Some of our audience may be aware of a story which broke yesterday concerning an investigation into Palestinian Authority school textbooks. Now, this was an initiative started by the British government, prompting the EU into commissioning an investigation of Palestinian Authority curriculum and textbooks and looking at them for incitement. The EU interim report had a very positive review of these books, Fleur, but it transpires that there's been a pretty fundamental mistake, and this is in a statement put out yesterday by Impact SE, the Institute for Monitoring Peace and Cultural Tolerance in School Education. I know it's an organization you know well. And they've revealed that this review, costing European taxpayers €220,000, looked at the wrong books. A presentation of the EU's interim report on the Palestinian curriculum revealed recently that actually the books they positively reviewed were Israeli Arabic textbooks. We've got comments on social media saying you couldn't make this up. 2 years in, over €220,000 spent. The German-based researchers use Jerusalem municipality textbooks for Arab schools. Seems to be your own textbooks. They praise them as Palestinian Authority books, say that they're improving by recognizing Israel and peacemaking. Can you comment on this debacle?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy to have the approval of the Eckhart Institute, funded by the European Union, because of the UK's endorsement of this, that our books are great. We knew that, and that's what we want all our school children in East Jerusalem using, the textbooks, that now we have the kosher stamp from the EU. So I'm very happy about that. Look, this is honestly a comedy of errors. I was, as you know, Natasha, because you came, I spoke to the House of Lords in January. I've been, before the corona broke out, I had an audience at the UN. I was going to go with NGO Monitor. Of course, Impact SC are friends of mine and colleagues, and we work and support each other. This is ridiculous. The time has come for the European Union and the British government, which is now not going to be in the European Union, to say what we're doing is furthering peace and not bringing peace closer. So what are we doing? This is really the mirror that everybody who funds any part of the Palestinian Authority should be looking at, because I believe that without all of this external funding and support and delegitimization of Israel, we would have already made a deal with the Palestinians, because everybody's putting them up a very tall tree, and it's time for them to come down, sit with us, and create peace for our people. And none of this external funding is helping in any of this.
Given the failure of this initiative to investigate and your own experience and expertise in this field, are you able to offer any alternative setup so that the EU...
Of course.
Rigorous...
We now have funding for all children, Arab children from East Jerusalem. We are ready. We have the funding to move them from the Palestinian Authority schools and textbooks and UNRWA to Jerusalem municipal schools for Arab children with the textbooks that now we have the praise of the Eckhart Institute. We have the resources. I couldn't have said that 5-10 years ago, but today we have those resources thanks to the Jerusalem Affairs Minister, past Zev Elkin, thanks to the Mayor, Moshe Leon, who's committed to this. We have the resources to bring all of those children into our school system. What we need is the families to be brave enough to do it, and we need to kick out the pressure and the mafia tactics of the Palestinian Authority, the Turkish government, you name it. We have a lot of players here in Jerusalem who are manipulating people in the Arab side.
Well, in the last 10 minutes or so of our discussion, I want to move on to look at the future of Jerusalem and what it is that the municipality is looking to develop. We've had a question asking for you to tell the audience something about the ambitious Mobileye plans for investing in Jerusalem and about company investment.
Ambitious what?
Mobileye plans?
Oh, yeah.
And about company investment in the city generally.
Okay, so this is really one of the things that I'm working very hard on, and that is developing the economy in Jerusalem and developing the economy for all sides of the city. We're also a city that has a problem with ultra-Orthodox men who have a low workforce participation, just like Arab women do. That's a whole other story, a whole other panel. But what I'm trying to do is bring foreign investment to the city. You know, I always say, if the British government or any other European government want to help, oh, there's so much to do. They want to help East Jerusalem, they want to help Arabs come and bring some companies here and set up jobs and give people a good livelihood. That's what the help that we need, and not funding these twisted school books. So we've got a very exciting project in East Jerusalem called Silicon Wadi. Not Silicon Valley, Silicon Wadi, which is Wadi's Valley. And we are creating tens of thousands of square meters in commercial, high-tech and hotels. That's going to give a huge boost to the job market there, a huge boost to the economy of Jerusalem. And I'm very, very busy pushing that forward. It's going to be a game changer. It's going to be a real game changer. At the same time, we're bringing companies to set up here. Jerusalem has incredible incentives for any company in research and development to open a branch. We give people reduced by half corporate tax from 13% to 7%. We have reduced property tax, and we have grants for every employee that people bring on. It pays to open up your business in Jerusalem. And in terms of Mobileye, Mobileye is a unicorn company, as many of you know. It's the capital of the autonomous vehicle of the future. And they stayed in Jerusalem, thankfully. They are partners of ours. They're going to be creating jobs for over 3,000 people in the next few years. I see great potential for immigrants, especially if we hear correctly, and there's going to be a big wave next year. I see great potential for Arab employees. We have the first Arab engineers there, which we're very, very pleased about. It's going to be a big boost, and hopefully this is one of many big companies that will realize that the diversity in Jerusalem, in our human capital, is an advantage for any company. This is a city where 70 languages are spoken between the immigrants and the Arabs and the different Christians for the different countries that are here. And so Jerusalem is the laboratory for any solution to any conflict in the region, the conflict that we have with the Palestinians, with the Arabs, and between Jews as well, in terms of the different religious streams that we have here. And so we believe that Jerusalem is the laboratory of the solution of the future. I want to also say that in 20 years' time, the future demography of the state of Israel looks like the present demography of Jerusalem. 37% Arabs, 25% ultra-Orthodox. In the future, the country will probably get to 25-30% Arab and 30% ultra-Orthodox. So the models for a shared society that we're creating in Jerusalem today are the models that will ultimately save the state of Israel in the future. And that's why I'm so invested in creating these models, because they're the ones that are going to bring a proper shared society for now and for the future.
We've been asked specifically about how involved Turkey is in Jerusalem. Do you have any insight into?
Look, I'm not an expert on it, but I know that I don't like what I see. They're giving away scholarships to young Arabs from poor homes, sending them to Turkey, thereby creating loyalty, which is problematic. They've got some education institutions. They've got their hands on some land. And we have to figure out how we kick them out.
There are some questions going to your dialogue with the East Jerusalem community in the context of this investment and this development. You've spoken about how a lot of it is focused. What is your relationship like with leaders of the community in advancing these projects, and how much buy-in are you getting?
I have deep relationships with Arabs of East Jerusalem. I have close friends where we're all Jerusalemites and we see each other that way. They understand that I'm there to help. They understand that I make my point very clear about sovereignty, and they agree with me, most of them. I'm shocked how many people come to me, the Arabs come to me and say, we don't want this to be two cities. Don't say anything, but you didn't come from me, but we don't want this to be two cities. And so I get encouraged. I get a warm reception every time I go to any of the projects that I help. And like I say, I've got friends who come to me. There's two types of people that I know there. The people who who like me understand that no government is perfect, and we can always do things better. And when they hear from me that I also believe that, it kind of neutralizes it. It neutralizes. And then there's some people who are very hostile. Even the hostile people, I believe that we can make into our allies and partners. Of course, not physically or terrorism hostile. I'm talking about politically hostile. And I say to them, be a part of it, run for council, and help us make the city a more equal in terms of the resource sharing. Once we can do that, the fact that they don't participate in politics is a problem, because the ultra-Orthodox, they vote in double the numbers, in double the percentage numbers in local elections than anybody else. So the ultra-Orthodox are very strategic voters, and they have double the representatives that their proportion of the city should have. And the reason why they're overrepresented is because the Arabs are underrepresented. They're not represented at all, but they are not represented because they don't vote. So they need to go out and vote for their own representatives in City Hall. Once they do that, I know that many of them see this as normalization. Many of them see this as a statement on sovereignty, but you have to face facts. Jerusalem is under Israeli sovereignty. And if you don't want to cut your nose to spite your face, and if you want to create a situation where you're bringing to your people equal resources, you have to be part of the conversation. And so I'm fighting for their opportunities, but they also have to be in the game, and they also have to fight for their own opportunities. And if they were in city council, my life would be a lot easier helping them.
One of the final questions I'm putting from our audience asks about a difference in approach or attitude taken by the Christian and Muslim residents of East Jerusalem. Now, that question was in relation to applications for Israeli citizenship, but are you able to speak about the Christian and Muslim communities in East Jerusalem more broadly as well?
Look, the Christian communities, let's be honest, anywhere in the Middle East have dwindled because of a concerted campaign against them by the Muslim fundamentalists. And so, yes, of course, there's Christians here, much less than they used to be. The Christians are normally certainly more willing to play ball, or they were in the past, because we're the only thing protecting their right to worship the way that they want. Let's be honest. Look what's happening in Egypt. Look what's happening everywhere else in the Middle East. The only country preserving the rights of freedom of worship for every religion is Israel. And so I think the Christians are pleased about that, but they're dwindling, unfortunately. I wouldn't say there's a huge difference in Jerusalem, and there's such a small minority that they don't really count that much in terms of public pressure or public opinion.
Fleur, finally, there is a sense within Israel amongst Israelis that they have a preference or an allegiance either to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. In terms of the economic investment Tel Aviv has with its startup capital status certainly been leading the way. How do you see Jerusalem with the idea of this Silicon Valley being, I'm sure, an integral part of the future prospects of the city, competing against its main rival?
Well, we don't see Tel Aviv as a rival. We see Tel Aviv as our little sister. It's half our population. They've got half our problems, of course. But look, I think that we have a couple of things here in Jerusalem which are very unique. The best academic institutions in the country are here. Hebrew University, the best design and art school in the country, Bezalel, is here. Engineering colleges, Hadassah Hospital, the best medical teaching hospital in the country is here. We've developed as a result of that a niche, a very important niche in biotech. 35% of biotech companies are Jerusalem-based. All I've been doing for the last 10 years, and even before I was a city council woman, is creating bridges between academia and industry. And now we have models that don't exist anywhere in the country. We have not just Silicon Wadi, but we have a high-tech village in the Hebrew University campus, which allows for young people, students even, to have jobs in high-tech before they even leave or think about leaving the city. And so we have done a lot to take Jerusalem and turn it into a ecosystem and an innovation hub in the country with special niches like computer vision, Mobileye, and like biotech. I believe Silicon Valley, I believe the education of the Arab population, the way they're supposed to be educated, the slow education of the ultra-Orthodox population who are fed up of being poor and understand that you can be ultra-Orthodox and have a job and not affect the way that you are or your identity. And so all these things are slowly coming to fruition. And what it will end up is, we are the largest city in the country. We are the most diverse city in the country. And please God, once we have normalization with the rest of the Middle East, which I'm working very hard towards as well, what we're going to have here is the city that's going to be one of the central capitals of the entire Middle East. And our Arab population will be a draw for the Middle East and not something to put us off. My vision is that Jerusalem is the back office of the Middle East in research and development and many, many different ways.
This hour has absolutely flown by. I can't thank you enough for taking
I can't believe an hour went by.
and giving us your insights. I hope you've had an eye to the comments that have been flooding in with praise and thanks to you. I certainly wish you all the very best for these initiatives in Jerusalem. I wish you every success on behalf of UKLFI.
I hope you all come back very soon when the skies open up.
Well, we look forward to visiting you soon then.
Please God.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.